Hello everyone, welcome to my wrap-up for the month of September in 2021. I said in my TBR that this had potential to be just an incredible month of reading. I had extremely high expectations for every book I plan to read. I also, in that, completely forgot about The Wisdom of Crowds and The God Is Not Willing, which I, of course, did read as those were both released. I also didn't read The Lions of Aurzon, because I, of course, finished it in August. So this wrap-up doesn't exactly match my TBR for the month, but, you know, if people got in trouble for that, everyone would be in trouble constantly on BookTube, because that doesn't happen very often. Let's get into it. So this was not, I wouldn't call it the best month of the year in terms of reading, in quality or quantity. Quantity was somewhat average. I read 6 books, but they were a little bit shorter than usual, although one was very long, which was around 3,300 pages. But in terms of quality, it was maybe the most consistent month I've ever had. My average rating for this month was 9.05. Of the 5 books, I only gave one of them a score of under 9 out of 10, which is what I will start with. Last month I started with like the book I gave the lowest rating and moved up, and people said they like that, so I'm sticking with it. And unfortunately, that same person, who I think only one person commented about it, is not going to be happy that my least favorite book of the month was The God Is Not Willing by Steven Erikson. But, like, The God Is Not Willing is a very good book. It would just happen to be in a pretty insane month. So, The God Is Not Willing, I do have a spoiler-free review for it. I just pointed at it like I'm going to edit in like a thing that you can click. I'm probably not going to do that. I'll probably bring it up as like the end of title card. No one watched that video, so maybe I should talk about it more, but whatever. That is spoiler-free for the entire series. I actually talk about when I think The God Is Not Willing could be read, which the quick answer is after The Crippled God. The long answer is it gets a little bit more complicated. Basically, this had 2 main plot lines, one of which revolved around Marines, one of which did not. I was not a giant fan of the Marine chapters. It brought down the average of the book. The non-Marine chapters were among my favorite in Malazan. So this would be a middle-of-the-pack Malazan book for me, like around Deadhouse Gate, so I still consider it a very good book. Just not among my favorite Malazan books. Not one of my favorite Malazan, like, final acts either. Like, the standard for Malazan final acts is a very high standard. Malazan tends to have some of the craziest final acts in fiction. But, is what it is. Like the other books more. You are about to see it got beat by a pretty tough field. So, next up, crazily my second least favorite book of the month, we have Jade War by Fonda Lee, which is the follow-up to Jade City by Fonda Lee. I forgot to say, The God Is Not Willing, I'm giving an 8.3 out of 10. Anyways, this is the follow-up to Jade City, and I consider it an improvement in basically all aspects. The only thing holding Jade City back from getting like a 9 out of 10 was just it didn't... Like, I was reading and I was like, these characters are really interesting, but I was not quite as emotionally connected to them, or even I was emotionally connected to them, but the moments that I feel like should have gotten an emotional reaction were not written in a way to get one. This did do that. This was already, like, for the first half of the book, it's a very character-driven book. The first half is very similar to Jade City as I'm reading it, and I'm like, you know, these are really interesting, multifaceted, complex characters. Like I was saying about, as an example of kind of what type of enjoyment get from there is I realized one of the characters, in his role, he's a somewhat bad person, but I realized, like, if he grew up in a normal role within society, just like, you know, find a career, get married, have kids, he would be like, everyone would consider him like a really good person. Like, he would probably be someone who'd build a community and be like, you know, a really supportive father, and would be like a really hard worker at work who would, you know, treat his fellow employees with respect. But the situation he's put in, like, I only realized this most of the way into the book, because in his role, he's complex. He's a complex character, and I think The characters in this, they feel very human. I saw Fonda Lee tweet once about character development in books, and what annoys her is when people just continually like change and then don't change back. This did such a good job of feeling like a human way of developing, while also like the characters are also not static at all. Because the easy, like, I think way to fall back on that is be like, all right, I don't think humans change, so I'll just like my character's just going to be static, which is not very interesting. And while humans change back in ways, we also do change in other ways. And so I think the development and the character work was excellent in this book. I would describe it as, in some ways, it's similar to something you would see like The First Law or some Lawson books, mainly like Midnight Tides or The Lines of Alverson, where it's not super clear like who the good guys are, like the people we're following. Are we like, are they the good guys? But it's also definitely, it's not a grimdark book. It's hard to explain, but if you like, having questions being posed about who the good guys are, while also not being a huge fan of grimdark, I would absolutely recommend this. If Jade Legacy lands, this could be one of my favorite trilogies, probably only losing out to 3 Hobb trilogies, Mistborn, and the 2 First Law trilogies. Am I forgetting any? I don't know. I'm also going to read Fionavar, so that might beat it back. But excellent book, excellent follow-up. I give it a 9.1 out of 10. Also did an excellent job of expanding the world building and the cultures and the experience of moving and trying to live in a different culture and then living in, like, how, like, if you go to a city like Vancouver, for example, there are like individual neighborhoods, and I think this is true in a lot of big cities, but there are individual neighborhoods where the majority of people living in that neighborhood all like is mostly like originated from the same country outside Canada, because obviously Canada, a huge percentage of our population are not born in Canada. And this did an amazing job of exploring what it is like to live in one of those communities. It was really excellent. Yeah, would highly recommend. Anyways, next we move on to, Jade War, 9.1 out of 10. Really excellent book. I also will say very straightforward writing style. I think those who are a fan of like the writing style of like Jim Butcher or Brandon Sanderson in his later books will probably really enjoy like the prose. It's never awkward, but it's very straightforward, which is actually kind of what I wanted. I just come off reading Howling Dark by Christopher Rocchio, which is not that, which I'll talk about in a second. Well, more than a second, because it's going to be later in the video, which is a hint to how great it was. Although all these books, like Jade War to my final book, were very, very close. Anyways, let's move on to The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince. I needed something to read basically in a day, because Wisdom of Crowds was going to come out. And I wanted to read that basically as soon as I had it. And I was like, hey, I'm kind of on Robin Hobb withdrawal, and she did it again. It's brilliant. She's, I still think, the best author in fantasy. Best character writer by far. Like, her ability to just make everyone feel human should be illegal for how next level this is. This is another one of those books where it's often discussed of when you should read it. You can kind of read it whenever. Like, it's not going to spoil anything. Like, this doesn't spoil anything from Realm of the Elderlings, and I don't think Realm of the Elderlings spoils anything from this. But I think you'll appreciate it more if you read it after Tawny Man, at least after Farseer, because one of my favorite like themes that Robin Hobb plays with, and a reoccurring idea in her books, is kind of the ripple effect that your actions have. And when you know what happens in Farseer and Tawny Man, you can see the small decisions that people make in this book ripple out and affect like even like the culture in a way that will then also come back and affect characters in Farseer and Tawny Man, which means, yes, even in a book set generations before Fitz Chivalry Farseer was born, Robin Hobb still managed to torture Fitz Chivalry Farseer. Anyways, this was fantastic. Hobb is the queen. Favorite author. It doesn't miss. Yeah. Next up was the book I read directly after it, which was The Wisdom of Crowds by Mr. Abercrombie, which this is, it's beaten a little hatred and is my favorite Abercrombie book. It's classic Abercrombie. Like, I got in and I was like, I missed Abercrombie humor. His dialogue is so, like, clever and smart. His voices are so distinctive. I'll probably at some point do a full First Law review. I really feel like I need to do that. There's some things I definitely want to talk about for the First Law. I definitely like the first trilogy. This had one POV that I was like less of a fan of than the rest of the POVs, which was Broad. But also there's like all the other 5 POVs were brilliant. They were so distinctive. Some of his best character arcs, I think, compared to the first trilogy, where it was more about exploration of characters who were already established. This trilogy had people who changed more and were more dynamic. I think I think Joe Abercrombie has just gotten better at writing side characters that feel more like people. But also he has a side cast of characters that he has had as POV characters in past books, which allows the side cast feel like it has more depth than any of his previous works, in my opinion. The ending is just classic Abercrombie. It's First Law. It was amazing. 9.2 out of 10. It's like, he doesn't waste words. His, like, economy of words for capturing personality is just so next level. So this was fantastic. And actually, the book I read right after that, I had 3 straight, this is going to be another 9.2, by the way. I had 3 straight 9.2s, and I liked each more than the last, and it is Howling Dark by Mr. Christopher Rocchio. I have a review on the channel of Empire of Silence, and I thought this was even better and very, very different. Empire of Silence, the main criticism you see for it is people say it's derivative of Name of the Wind or Dune or whatever they want to say. And I don't fully agree, but I see where people are coming from. This was not only not derivative, this is one of the most original books I've read. Rocchio, as a pure prose writer, is top 3, in my opinion, of everyone I've read. It's like GGK, Hobb, Rocchio. That's my top 3 for prose. Hadrian is such a distinctive character. He also increased the sidecast. And, like, this is one of those books where, like, the setting and the themes and the writing and the way he uses first-person retrospective adds so much to this story. I love how, I'm not going to say what trope, but he almost does, like, a subversion of the trope. Which is truly big brain time. Like, this is, I think, not quite as, like, emotional of a read as maybe, like, The Willful Princess and The Piebald Prince, but how much it makes you think as you read. I also want to say, random thing for Rocchio, no one has better starts to chapters than Christopher Rocchio, and I mean no one. I feel like he puts as much effort into starting chapters as other authors put in for first lines of books. Like, there are some that are spoilery, where it's like, if there's one especially that's late in the book that I literally on Discord commented, like, how good is this sentence as, like, a hook? I wish it wasn't, like, a major spoiler so I could say it, but if it wasn't a major spoiler, it would be one of the best first lines to a book I've ever read. I cannot wait to see where this goes. This got weird following in the footsteps of Dune, from what I've been told. The books get weirder as they go. The people who have read it know specifically what I'm talking about. It's like chapter 43. But this was just one of the most, like, eerie, atmospheric, and smart books that I have read in a long time. Rocchio's, like, his world building, the world that he's created is insane. if I had, like, any criticism for it, I would say there's, like, a character who was a very supporting cast, and this starts with, like, there's a time skip in between Empire of Silence and Howling Dark, and it feels like the way they became a bigger character in their role was maybe a little bit clunky, but, like, this was so good. So this was a 9.2 out of 10 as well. Man, Rockio is just so good at writing. Like, this is one of those books that, like, I can open to a random page and there's probably, like, something that I could use as in a dramatic intro because of how well it's written on that page. You guys gotta read Christopher Rockio. Might be the most underread person in the genre in terms of just the talent in writing and thought that he puts into this book and his handling of first-person retrospective. Anyways, and the actual first book I read of the month was a reread of The Shadow Rising, book 4 in the Wheel of Time, which is, as you all know, one of my favorite series of all time. And this is a very common pick for people's favorite book in that series. It is actually, like, it's high up there, but there are multiple Wheel of Time books that I firmly like more than The Shadow Rising. But The Shadow Rising is where the Wheel of Time really becomes itself. The first 3 books don't expand the world building to the same degree. They don't focus on or explore culture to the same degree. There's more of a formula to them. This one is kind of when it starts to expand and become itself. The Aiel culture is maybe my favorite culture in fiction. It feels like a lot of fantasy or sci-fi cultures, just from a realistic, like, as they're writing it perspective, tend to have really one thing they focus on. Like, or maybe like one or two. Where if I, like, name a fantasy culture, if you've read it, if I say, like, the Dothraki or Lether from Malazan, you could probably name the couple things that, like, are really unique about that culture. The Aiel feel like one of the most multifaceted culture. It obviously has its influences from Dune, and ironically, like, which is, they just live somewhere where water is the most valuable resource. And ironically, the part that is the most, like, inspired by Dune, some people say copied by Dune, whatever, maybe. But that part of their culture, like, even if you remove that, they would still be one of the most, like, absurdly multifaceted culture. The stuff you learn about their history in this book is some of the most, like, it's not the most emotional part of the Wheel of Time, but I think it's some of the most genius, like, culture building that it is the most genius culture building that I have ever read in a novel. It's next level. The way that Aiel culture, the various aspects of it, like their history, their various customs, how it impacts their central core beliefs, can be felt so much through the various characters, where it's kind of like the characters and the culture feed on itself, where it's like the culture has impacted the characters and makes the characters feel more distinctive, and then the characters also show you things about the culture, and then you understand the culture better, which makes you understand the characters better, and it's like a self-feeding loop. Rand really starts to become not as standard. He becomes a lot more Machiavellian. It's probably Perrin's best book in the entire series. Matt by this book is a joy. Like, it doesn't really have a weird plot. I've said this a lot about Robert Jordan. I don't think his strength as an author is his writing character-driven plots. And by that I mean literally, like, if you were to say what the plot of, say, a Wisdom of Crowds would be, the events in the plot and the conflict is largely built by the decisions and personality of the characters. That's something I don't think Robert Jordan is particularly good at, if I'm being completely honest. But what he is incredible at is just having plot happen and having the characters develop and respond and grow from that plot. Also, this book just reminded me how creative Robert Jordan could be. The way this book starts, not chapter 1, but like chapter 2, I don't know where he came up with this stuff. It's something I'm really excited to see on the TV show. Yeah, I mean, I love The Shadow Rising. It's amazing. No one watches the spoiler reviews, which makes me sad. But whatever. I have that one recorded, but I just haven't uploaded it. I'll probably upload it eventually. I don't know, maybe. We'll see. But that's my spoiler free for The Shadow Rising. So this does get a 9.3 out of 10. I actually, despite all the praise, I did move it down from 9.4, and there's two reasons. And the main one is Fail. There was a character in general for the Wheel of Time who was not among my favorite for the first half of the series, and is one of my favorite characters in the series for the second half, who on reread I have liked from page 1. I was hoping that would happen with another character, which is Fail. It has not. I know I'm going to like this character more in the future. I like them more in the future books. But, even on reread, they're still a pain in the ass, especially in the first half of this novel. And two, and this was another thing I was wondering whether it should change on reread, compared to The Lord of Chaos, Knife of Dreams, The Gathering Storm, Towers of Midnight, and A Memory of Light, it does not quite hit me in the emotions as hard as those books do. I don't know why, but it just doesn't. I think, man, some of the stuff is so good, though, and it really is where the Wheel of Time comes into its own. So, those are the 6 books that I read in the month of September of 2021. It was a fantastic reading month. Like, every book I read was consistently at least, like, very good. And they were very good in different ways. Like, The Wheel of Time, Sun Eater, The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince, Greenbone, and Wisdom of Crowds, and The God Is Not Willing are all like extremely distinctive from one another. So I wasn't even reading books that were like amazing in the same way, and it just made it a really rewarding reading month. So I hope everyone else's reading month went just as well. Let me know how it did go. Bye, everybody.